We will now begin exploring motion and movement and how this applies to the human body by studying kinesiology and biomechanics. Kinesiology is the study of human motion, dealing mainly with the muscles and muscle functions. Biomechanics is the study of movement. More specifically, it is the movement involved in a strength exercise or execution of a sports skill. It deals mainly with physical factors such as speed, mass, acceleration, levers, and force, along with the physical functions of the movement. Let's begin. We will begin our study of kinesiology by discussing muscle contraction. There are three main types of muscle contractions: concentric, eccentric, and isometric. In a concentric contraction, the muscles shorten to produce movement. The shortening of the biceps in a biceps curl is an example of a concentric contraction. In a concentric contraction, the muscular force and movement are in the same direction. In an eccentric contraction, the muscle lengthens or stretches as it contracts. An example of an eccentric contraction is the lengthening of the biceps muscle as you lower the weight back down. Eccentrically contracting the biceps as it lengthens controls the speed of descent of the dumbbell. In an eccentric contraction, the muscular force is in the opposite direction of the movement. In an isometric contraction, you hold a fixed position. You exhibit strength, but there is no movement of the limbs. In an isometric contraction, the applied muscular force meets an equal resistance. The result is no movement. As you perform a movement, the main muscles, or agonists, undergo a concentric contraction while the opposing muscles, or antagonists, undergo an eccentric contraction. The adjacent parts stabilize the body via isometric contraction. Thus, all three operate simultaneously, with each muscle serving a specific muscle role. A prime mover or agonist muscle is the main muscle involved in a concentric contraction. For example, the biceps during the concentric contraction of a bicep curl. An assistant mover usually plays a secondary role to the prime mover muscles involved. For example, the brachioradialis and the brachialis during the concentric contraction of a bicep curl. An antagonist muscle has an action directly opposite that of the agonist. For example, the triceps during the concentric contraction of a bicep curl. A stabilizer muscle is a muscle that steadies or holds a body part in place. The role of a particular muscle will change depending on the movement. Synergy in movement refers to the action of one muscle counteracting an undesirable action of another muscle. The counteracting muscle is also referred to as a neutralizer. There are two kinds of synergy that a muscle can exhibit: helping synergy and true synergy. Helping synergy occurs when two muscles contract simultaneously to produce one movement, while their other actions cancel each other out. For example, the internal and external obliques ordinarily cause spinal flexion and rotate the shoulders. During a crunch, as both sides are engaged, the shoulder rotation is canceled out. True synergy occurs when a different muscle contracts to stop the secondary action of another muscle. For example, the biceps muscle works to both supinate or turn the forearm, as well as flex the elbow. When the pronator quadratus cancels the supinating tendency of the biceps so that only flexion occurs, this is an example of true synergy. A muscle can contract with different amounts of force and in different ways to produce different types of movement. A sustained movement is one in which there is continuous muscle contraction to continue the movement. A sustained movement is one in which there is continuous muscle contraction to continue the movement. A ballistic movement is one in which there is inertial movement after an explosive or quick maximum force contraction. Guided movement is movement that occurs when both the agonist and antagonist contract to control the movement. And dynamic balance movements are movements in which there are constant agonist-antagonist muscle contractions to maintain a certain position or posture. 6 primary movements occur at the joints between body segments: flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, rotation, and circumduction. Flexion is a decrease in the angle between two body segments, such as bending your elbow. Extension is an increase in the angle between two body segments. Extension of the elbow occurs when you straighten your arm. Abduction is movement away from the midline of the body. Adduction is movement toward the midline of the body. Raising your arms out to the sides is an example of abduction, whereas lowering them back down is adduction. Rotation is the circular movement of a body segment around a long axis, such as it occurs with rotation of the forearm from the shoulder joint. Special rotations occurring at the forearms and feet include pronation, supination, inversion, and eversion. Circumduction is the sequential combination of movements outlining a geometric cone, such as arm circles around the shoulder joint. We commonly describe humans in terms of the planes they occupy. There are three imaginary planes that pass through the human body: the transverse plane, frontal plane, and sagittal plane. The transverse plane passes through the body in a line parallel to the ground, dividing the body into upper and lower portions. The frontal plane is a vertical plane passing through the body from left to right, dividing it into front and back portions. The sagittal plane is a vertical plane passing through the body from front to back, dividing the body into left and right portions. Now that we have discussed how to describe human movement, we will now discuss movement itself in the study of biomechanics. We will begin with stability, as this is necessary to ensure safety and effectiveness when using free weights. The basic principle of stability is simple. The larger your base of support, the greater your stability. Bending your knees and proper placement of the feet are ways to increase stability when lifting free weights. Muscular force is broken down into several components: magnitude, direction, application, and line of action. Magnitude refers to how much force is applied. In this example, the squatter must apply a force upwards against the barbell greater than the force being applied to his shoulders by the barbell in order to push the barbell up. Direction refers to how the force is applied. For example, is it applied horizontally, vertically, or a combination of both? In this example, the force is applied vertically. Application of force refers to where the force is applied on the body, or implement used. In this example, the muscular force is applied to where the barbell sits on the squatter's back. Line of force refers to the line of action of the movement. To depict a line of action, a straight line is drawn from the point of application of force through the direction of force. The more directly the force is applied in exactly the same direction as the intended movement, the greater the amount of force that goes in this direction. In this example, if the squatter were to take a wider stance, and therefore move his feet away from the line of action, he would require more force to push the bar up. The angle of pull is the variance of force at different points in the range of motion of an exercise. When you perform a strength exercise, the strength exhibited at different points in the range of motion will vary according to the angle at which the muscle pulls. Newton's first law of motion. An object remains at rest or continues to move with constant velocity in a straight line unless compelled by forces acting upon it. Resting inertia means that when an object is at rest, it tends to stay at rest, unless acted upon by some outside force. Moving inertia means that when an object is in motion, it will remain in motion unless acted upon by some outside force. Newton's second law of motion deals with force and its relationship to mass and acceleration. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. This means that both the mass of an object and the speed at which it is moved are relative to the force applied to it. Taking this one step further, we define work as force times distance. Therefore, work can be defined as being dependent not only on the distance an object has moved, but how much force is applied to the object in order to move it. Power is defined as the work done in a unit of time. Therefore, if you and another person were both lifting 100 pounds, but you lifted the weight in 2 seconds as opposed to the 3 seconds your neighbor took, you exerted more power. Newton's third law of motion states that objects in contact exert equal and opposite forces on each other. This law can be demonstrated in the push-up. When performing a push-up, you push against the floor with your hands. The floor, in turn, pushes against you. A lever is defined as a rigid bar that turns around an axis of rotation, or fulcrum, and can be categorized in first, second, or third class. A first-class lever has its fulcrum or balance point between the force and the resistance to the force. An example of a first-class lever is a simple seesaw. Similar movement is found in the nodding of the head. The muscles in the back of the head provide the force, the fulcrum is the spine, and the front of the head is the resistance. A second-class lever is one in which the weight, resistance, is distributed between the axis of rotation and application of force. An example of a second-class lever is a wheelbarrow. The force is applied to the end that is lifted up. The resistance is in the middle where the load is carried, and the fulcrum is on the wheel at the end. When rising onto your toes, the foot acts as a second-class lever. The toes are the fulcrum. The load, or resistance, is centered on the midfoot, and the force being applied to the heel. A third-class lever is one in which the force is applied between the axis and resistance, such as an engine piston. A biceps curl is a third-class lever, in that the load is held in the hand. The biceps attached to the forearm induces flexion of the elbow, and the movement rotates on the elbow joint itself. There are many force transmission arrangements in the body. One arrangement is the wheel and axle arrangement, which can be found in the lateral rotation of the shoulder joint. A pulley arrangement can be found in the patella. Pushing and pulling occur in straight lines away from and towards the body. Torque is rotary movement in any plane around an axis. Gravity is the downward pulling force that creates resistance. The center of gravity is the point in the body around which your weight is equally distributed. Kinesthesis is the ability to perceive your position and movement of the body or limbs in space. This ability relies on various receptors in the joints, muscles, and tendons. Kinesthesis allows us to adjust our posture, position, speed, or acceleration for better movement and balance. Vision, as it relates to kinesthesis, is the use of visual reference points or visual cues when doing exercises to better balance your body and to stay oriented to your surroundings. In conclusion, biomechanics and kinesiology help to determine what exercises a person should do, how the workout should be conducted, how effective exercise execution is, and if the exercises you use are safe. Biomechanics shows you the way to do exercises most effectively, while kinesiology tells you exactly what muscles are involved in the particular actions that take place in the exercise. As fitness educators, we should be concerned not only with various techniques of movement, but also how movement impacts posture, body mechanics, and body musculature, regardless of client motivation, whether it be improving physique, strength, endurance, or muscle tone. A basic understanding of biomechanical principles plays an important role in establishing fitness programs for beginners.